They shall grow not old, as we who are left grow old. The age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
A young man from Bonavista who was a bank clerk. He was killed in action a few months later on November 27th, 1915. He's buried here at Asmak Cemetery, Suvla, Turkey.
Captain Charles Whiten, Newfoundland Regiment. Enlisted St. John's September 1st, 1914. He was killed in action November 25th, 1915, and was the first officer of the regiment killed in action.
Private John Fitzgerald, Newfoundland Regiment. Killed in action December 1st, 1915 as a stretcher bearer while tending to wounded.
Number 44, Private John Dunphy, Newfoundland Regiment, enlisted age 20, St. John's, October 1st, 1914. Killed in action December 12th, 1915, by a bullet wound to the head that glanced off a periscope held by a sentry.
William Frank Hardy, he landed in Gallipoli on September the 19th, 1915, and he was killed in action on September the 23rd.
We're at the grave of Private George Sims. His hometown was Pilley's Island, and on his gravestone it says, "Pride of our home was he. We gave him up, O God, for country and for thee."
At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
In September of 2022, we traveled to Turkey, and specifically the Gallipoli Peninsula, with a group of 33 Newfoundlanders to commemorate the 7th Caribou and the Trail of the Caribou monuments to the Royal Newfoundland Regiment. One of the key things we had was a wreath program. The wreath program was, we're gonna take a wreath, put a soldier's picture on it, and lay it on every grave of every Newfoundlander that's buried on the Gallipoli Peninsula. And there's 25 of them. 22 from the Royal Newfoundland Regiment, 2 that were in the British Army, 1 that was in the Australian Army.
I'm here because my grandfather was here in 1915. My grandfather's name was Howard Leopold Morey. He was from Ferryland on the southern shore of Newfoundland. And I was here 100 years later on the 20th of September 2015 to commemorate the landing of the Newfoundland Regiment in Suvla Bay on Kangaroo Beach.
I had a great uncle on my mother's side of the family, William Edward Lashana, who fought in Gallipoli and subsequently fought in Beaumont Hamel, and like many other Newfoundlanders was one of the casualties of war there.
Great War, World War I, as it's now known, broke out as a result of the monarchy and empires in Europe flexing its muscles and wanting to grow and expand. Oddly enough, they were all related, right? All the kings were cousins of all the great empires. So what's called the Central Powers would be Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Bulgaria. And then later on, others joined that side. And on the other side were the Allies, which mainly comprised of the United Kingdom and the Empire. The Empire, or the Commonwealth as we now know it, back then was massive, but it consisted of 7 main distinct countries. First of all, the United Kingdom, India, New Zealand, Canada, South Africa, Australia, and the Dominion of Newfoundland. As well, France and Belgium and Russia. Later on in the war, in October, Italy joined, and as the war progressed throughout the years, other countries joined both sides. Interestingly enough, the Ottoman Empire wanted to be neutral, but in October of 1914, they joined the Central Powers. They had been courted by both sides, the Allies and the Central Powers, but when the Ottomans had ordered 2 warships from the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom were worried about which side the Ottomans were going to veer towards, so they confiscated those 2 warships. The Germans actually had military attachés and advisors embedded with the Turkish military, and they had invested in their civilian infrastructure of railroads and roads and that kind of stuff. When the call came out, men from all over Newfoundland and Labrador answered the call. And later on in the war, there was hundreds of women who joined as well to serve in various roles. So they came from everywhere. They sailed, they walked, they took trains, and they all came to St. John's to sign up, because this is where the recruiting center was. Back then, it was cool to believe in your king and your country and the empire. It was an adventure, and it was a well-paid job. Actually, Newfoundland soldiers got paid more than soldiers in other Commonwealth countries. An adventure that would be over by Christmas. And some people just needed to eat. They were hungry. They encamped down by Kitty, which is we call Pleasantville today, and they lived in bell tents. There were cookhouses and rifle ranges and that kind of stuff. They mainly trained in the White Hills and down around Pleasantville. The British wanted the Ottoman Empire out of the war, so that was the intent, and they also wanted to open the Black Sea route to help resupply the Russians easier, as opposed to going all the way up around Norway into Murmansk. So at the time, Winston Churchill, the First Lord of the Admiralty, suggested a quick rush up the Dardanelles with a whole bunch of naval power to capture Constantinople. They were using a lot of old plans or old maps. They had originally proposed this same kind of operation years ago, and everybody said, nope, this is not going to work, it's silly. But it was going to be quick and decisive, and they looked at all the forts and the guns that were defending the Dardanelles, and they were old. Like out of the 100+ guns, there were only 16 that were modern day guns that had a range of more than maybe say 6 or 7 miles. The rest were short range, old weapons. So at the end of the 18th of March, which is a national holiday in that part of Turkey, for 118 Turkish soldiers that lost their lives, they inflicted over 700 casualties on the British and French navies. They sank 3 major warships and severely damaged 3 more, and several other ships had minor damage. The Allies decided, well, we're going to do a land campaign, and we're going to neutralize the forts and neutralize the threat to the Navy, so the Navy can go up and take Constantinople. So the Newfoundland Regiment was the only regiment from Newfoundland, obviously. And they had finished all their training, and they were down in Camp Aldershot in the southern England, right? And they don't know what to do with them. On the initial landings on the 25th of April, there was a Scottish battalion with the 29th Division, and they suffered horrendous losses and horrendous casualties in April, May, and June. It was decided they need to be replaced. So they looked around, and here's this Newfoundland Regiment, now highly trained. They'd been in England for about a year or so, and they were chosen to go to Gallipoli. Later on in August in Aldershot, Lord Kitchener was addressing the battalion. Kitchener has said, "I'm sending you to the Dardanelles, boys. Sharpen those bayonets for the Turks." And when the parade dismissed, one soldier looked at another soldier and said, "What the hell's a Turk?" So the 29th Division commander gives the 88th Brigade commander written orders that the Newfoundland Regiment is coming, and they were to incorporate the Newfoundland Regiment into the 88th Brigade, which is replacing the Royal Scots who had left in July. And later on, they sailed out of England into Egypt, into Alexandria, and then took a train over to Cairo to become acclimatized and get their equipment ready. So they learned about fighting in a desert climate. They were given desert types of uniforms, pith helmets, and different types of clothing, shorts as opposed to pants. And on the 13th of April, they left Cairo and they went through a series of islands. And then on the night of the 19th/20th of September, they were put ashore in Kangaroo Beach. And it's a harbor, it's not like an assault beach.
But I just couldn't help but think about those poor men that were coming ashore on those beaches. My grandfather was one of them. He was one of over 1,000 Newfoundland soldiers that landed on Kangaroo Beach.
We're at Kangaroo Beach. We've just laid a wreath for all the Newfoundlanders that landed here, one of them being my grandfather, William Dalton. He did survive and he came home, and here we are.
As they were moving off the beach, the adjutant, Captain Randall, and 8 others were wounded, but luckily there were no fatalities.
This was the first time the Newfoundland Regiment was in battle. This is what christened them to war. This is what took the romance out of war for them and showed them the harsh reality of what war really is.
All of the soldiers who went on that expedition were really, really young, about my age. I don't think I'd have the courage or bravery to go into it knowing that there was a high chance I would die. I think that makes them very strong and brave.
We're Newfoundlanders, we, especially back in those days, we were used to hard times, we were used to hard living, bad weather, being out on the water, cutting wood, growing your own vegetables, pulling fish from the sea. We're just a hardy people, Newfoundlanders, and we take a bad situation and we make it better.
We have a saying home that most Newfoundlanders could put an arse in a cat, and it just means that they can turn their hand to any task at hand.
In reality, this kind of high ground is where the British would have occupied, right? The patrol would have left about a couple of 100 meters that way.
So Caribou Hill, there was a part of the front line where the Turkish soldiers would come out towards the evening and occupy it and snipe. And they would snipe at the positions and cause a lot of havoc. So the Newfoundland Regiment was tasked to go up and put an end to this. So Lieutenant Donnelly led a force up and the idea was to occupy where the Turkish soldiers would occupy and wait for them to show up and ambush them when they tried to occupy their positions. Their planning map was just a sketch that had all the dry ravines marked on there. They crossed the British front lines. On the way up, he ran into opposition. There's some pretty close combat. There's people running out of bullets and trying to get more. They've used all their grenades. They're being reinforced. There were some people wounded. Lots of fighting going on. And then Lieutenant Ross, with another group of Newfoundland soldiers, was sent in to help. And they ended up capturing this place that we now know as Caribou Hill. And they kept that for the entire time they occupied that part. They had something to prove. This is their first gallantry medals. Right? So a small patrol, hand-picked men, go out and they want to stop their friends from getting killed. So they want to take this sniper position. The battle goes on all night long. We suffer a couple of casualties, 1 killed in action. And you can see where the different trenches were on this map. And if you angle it and measure the distances.
Some people claim that this is the closest the Allies ever got to Constantinople.
We have a depleted regiment. They're sick, they're malnourished. They've been working in hot weather. They have tropical gear. Some of them have shorts and pith helmets or light jackets. And then there's a freak storm in November. It rains, torrential downpour of rain. Soldiers are washed away, and then it snows and it freezes.
The trenches were flooded quickly and became rivers. Everyone was soaked to the skin. This rain was followed by sleet, and later the wind changed and became a northerly gale with frost. It was pretty severe. We wore shorts and we wore pith helmets. So when the storm came on, we weren't prepared at all. A lot of men went off with frozen feet, one thing and another. I managed to survive.
I can remember now the night of the storm. Turks were on the top of the hill and we were down at the bottom. We had to get out the trenches all together practically for a little while and get up on the top again to roll all halfway up your waist with water.
When they talked about the floods that occurred in November of 1915 and how the water came down from the hills and basically inundated that area where the blockhouse was, where they weren't able to move, up to their waists in freezing water, frostbite and everything else, it must have been terrible and very, very traumatic.
Remember, we're from Newfoundland. We see a lot of snow here. When the trenches started filling up full of water, they just jumped out of the trenches but stayed and held the front line. Lord Kitchener came to visit Gallipoli, and right after he left, they were told they were going to evacuate the Gallipoli Peninsula. The mission was no longer attainable, and there was just using up too much resources because the Western Front was going to be the priority. So on the nights of the 19th and 20th of December, all the people in Suvla Bay were withdrawn. The highest point of any type of success in the Gallipoli Campaign were the two evacuations. So the night of the 19th and 20th of December, the Newfoundland Regiment, along with the 29th Division and the rest of the Anzac Corps, were withdrawn without losing a single person. And then on the 22nd of December, the Newfoundland Regiment were told they had to go back to Cape Helles, which is that point where the British originally landed. So they're put into W Beach on the 24th of December, and they spend Christmas there. We suffer more casualties. On the night of the 8th and 9th of January, 1916, we're withdrawn for the last time out of Lancashire Landing Beach.
We're at the grave of Private George Sims. He died of his wounds on the 30th of December 1915. He had shell wounds to his leg and abdomen, and he was treated here at the 17th Stationary Hospital, Cape Helles, during the second evacuation.
Private Robert Morris of the Newfoundland Regiment enlisted in St. John's on the 1st of April 1915 at the age of 28. His hometown was Great Jarvis in Hermitage Bay. He was killed in action January 7th, 1916, killed by a shell blast in the cookhouse. The last Newfoundlander killed in Gallipoli.
The Newfoundland Regiment went to Egypt, and where they trained more and they stayed there, rest, recuperated, and then later in May they went to the Somme by way of Marseille, and they took trains up to a certain point and walked the rest of the way into a town called Louvencourt.
And now they're off to the battlefields of France and Flanders. 1,600 will pay the supreme sacrifice. Thousands more will be injured or maimed for life. But they will win a stellar reputation. They will earn their title better than the best. And at the end of the war, monuments to their sacrifices in France and Flanders will be built. But in Gallipoli, it'll take over a century before a monument is built to these brave men.